pleasure to be here with all of you this morning, and I am so very excited to get this opportunity to share this presentation with you. This morning, we'll be discussing the concept of creating bridges to opportunities for secondary and tertiary students that could lead to an incredible future for those who are usually too far removed to take advantage of such. But let's start at the beginning. A little bit about me. My name is Jessie Nunes, aka Catalina Staheli in Second Life. My goal for this session is to share a bit about my background in both worlds and then to delve into how all of this content creation, 3D modeling, online job stuff can open up opportunities and possibilities that really can have a global impact. And hopefully there will be time for questions at the end, so definitely write them down, any that may come to mind, and if I can't answer them during this time slot, I'll be more than happy to answer them afterward. All right, ready, set, here we go. So, I was born in San Francisco, and thanks to the nomadic lifestyle of military families, I grew up in Louisiana. And it was actually a great experience to get to see such different parts of the United States. And I believe it helped open my mind to the possibility of making my home anywhere. I received my Bachelor of Science degree in secondary education, focusing on the social sciences, but also receiving additional certifications in K through 12 special education and secondary English language arts from the University of New Orleans, 2008. In 2014, I received my Master of Education degree in Gifted and Talented. I am the first person in my family to graduate from college, and statistically speaking, I shouldn't really ever have gone to college. The child of a single parent who worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I've been working since I was 18, and it was only with a full scholarship that I was able to get to university. Now, once I got there, I was utterly lost in this brand new world that had never been a part of conversations in my home. I actually remember when my advisor asked me, "Are you here for your bachelor's degree or your master's degree?" And I honestly didn't know the difference between the two of them, my little 18-year-old self. It was like jumping into the deep end of a pool. And not only was that water a cold wave of reality to how unprepared I was, I had to find a way to keep my head afloat on my own. From having to maintain a minimum GPA to keep my scholarship, to dealing with the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in my sophomore year, my college experience was memorable. I've also been teaching in the K through 12 education system for the past 11 years, and I love it. I love the challenge, the laughter, the visible growth you can see in the students. Every day is an adventure, and especially when working with teenagers, you never know what that adventure is going to shape up to look like. Once I graduated, I started teaching at a charter school in New Orleans. Looking back now, I can say that it was a job that truly shaped who I became as a teacher. They say that teaching in the inner city is, or can be, a rough experience, and I will admit that my first 2 years definitely were. I had no classroom and there was no curriculum. I was given a cart and told to figure it out. While other teachers would have their planning period, I would go into their room with my cart and my class, and I would have my class in their room. I remember we had so many kids sitting in one class that there weren't even enough desks for everyone, and we had used lawn furniture just so that everyone had a seat. I can also remember that a lot of kids there didn't believe that they would ever make it to college or to really even look beyond what was going to happen after high school. My first year, I remember one girl, just 14 years old, freshman, looking up at me and telling me that she had just to wait until she was 18 so she could get put on welfare like a mama. That was her ambition in life. We lost a lot of teachers every year with a very high turnover rate. And in my 4th year, I remember the turnover rate for the school I had been at was 80%. 80% of the staff, faculty, and administration chose not to return the following August. The students had very little consistency in their lives, not only at home, but also in school. And as we know in education, consistency is one of those foundational aspects that helps a student thrive. It was also sort of interesting because the school that I was working for actually changed its official name 3 times in the 4 years that I worked there. The unspoken reason was because if there was a different name, it was a different school, and the test scores that were never very good couldn't follow. So every year we had a new name. It was a brand new school opening up, even though it was the same students and some of the same teachers. We had administrators changing records to make it appear that our school had 100% graduation rates. There were 2 competing gangs in the school where the initiation was to find a student in the hallway and beat them to within an inch of their life. The students had an apparent code word that when the cafeteria served a certain breakfast food, muffins, as it happened to be, students considered that fight club in the school, and anyone you had an issue with, that was the day to settle it. Oops. We had security patrolling the school every day, and more often than I would even like to think, there were weapons found. There were students involved in a drug ring that circled through many of the schools in the city, all working together to promote and provide across the city. These were teenagers that had arranged this entire thing. It was really amazing. I remember this one morning when a student, a junior at the time, came to my room. I was on the 3rd floor in this old building, and the lunchroom was on the 1st. The student looked at me and said, "Miss Nunes, I've been trying to settle things between 2 opposing groups in the school, and if I'm not able to do it, things might go down at lunch today. If that happens, I want you to close your door and stay here. We like you. We'll make sure nothing happens to you." These were students telling me this, teenagers. And throughout all of this, we had teachers working so very hard, fighting the system and advocating for the students and what they could be and should be, and helping in every way possible to show a glimmer of success and possibility beyond what they saw around them. Now, eventually I found that I was faced with a choice. It was time to take a breath and step away, beginning a new journey, or I was going to face the issue of becoming burnout is very real for teachers. All across the United States, there are stories of how badly paid we are, and when you have teachers who are already working an extra job here and there just to make sure all the bills are paid, there isn't the luxury of a getaway vacation or even a massage to just work the stress out of those muscles. I don't believe that it says anything about the type of teacher you are or that it reflects on your level of caring about your job or your class or your kids, but sometimes we just have to take a breath and step back. After 4 years of teaching in the inner city of New Orleans, it was my time to do that. Because I had absolutely no compass pointing me in any particular direction, I began applying for jobs pretty much anywhere that I could think of. Everywhere in the United States looked appealing, and I just said, okay, let's do this. A couple weeks later, I found myself receiving a request for a job interview with the district in Alaska. Now, growing up in southern Louisiana, I had never seen snow. It was a completely foreign concept to me. But I was ready for a new leg in my journey, and I said, why not? So I went and I visited my dad, and I told him that I had made the decision to move to Alaska and go teach. He had worked in Alaska before as part of the Coast Guard, and he had told me stories about visiting Borough and Anchorage and how he'd been stationed in Kodiak for a while. I knew he'd gone to Alaska before, and so he was the first person that I told after I was hired. He lets out this deep sigh and just pulls out this pad of paper and pen and starts writing down all the stuff I was going to need. I literally had no idea what I was in for. A few months later, I found myself beginning this journey in Alaska, and it was just like diving off the deep end into a swimming pool again. In the 7 years I've been teaching in Alaska, only one of those years has been on the road system. I've lived in 3 villages, brand new cultures, a brand new climate, a whole new world for me to learn. That first year, I made it to Anchorage and met my principal for the first time. There really hadn't been any correspondence from the district or the school that I was going to work for, and so I literally showed up with a suitcase, a duffel bag, and a pillow. And I can laugh about that now, but I did not even realize at the time that the village I'd be working for was completely cut off from everything. There were no roads to get there. There was no store there. It would take 2 planes just to get from Anchorage to our village. I had no idea about traveling in the bush or having to book planes that would take you from a city to a remote area. Thank goodness that the district was willing to give people an early advance for us to be able to buy the supplies and start getting what we needed. Otherwise, I may not have even made it to the village. I was completely and totally unprepared. In fact, and I'll just add this, at my first district in-service in Alaska, the special ed director stood up and told the entire staff, he said, half of you will not come back next year. And we all looked at each other. And he said, if you can survive in the bush for 3 years, you can write your ticket to any job on the road system you want, but most of you will not make it. And it was just a statistical fact. However, that was 7 years ago and many, many flights ago. I'd figured it out by now. I have lived in 3 villages in Alaska, each in a very different part geographically and culturally. 5 years ago, I came home to where I am now, teaching in a fantastic little village, which is right above the Arctic Circle. See if I can put it up here. So, yep, Alaska. If you look at the slideshow, where the yellow is up there, that's where I am now. And then let's see if this is going to work. And that's my home. That's a picture right outside my front door. All right. Okay, so still 2 flights from Anchorage to get home. And I'll admit to you, flying is not my favorite thing in the world, but let me tell you about what happened when I landed here for the first time. When I arrived in August 2014, I remember everybody in the community stopping when they saw me to ask who I was and to say thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for teaching our children. We are so grateful that you are here, and we know that you've had to leave your family to come and be with ours, and we are so grateful and appreciative. Thank you so much. This was how I was welcomed in this new community, and it was absolutely such a change from anything I had experienced before. I knew this was going to be something very special. When Thanksgiving came, the entire community showed up at the gymnasium at school, and the entire village celebrated Thanksgiving together. They had tables laid out and gave rides to all the elders and made sure that everybody was able to get there. When things started, they put out frozen fish all over the place for people to enjoy, just pulling out whole frozen fish and plopping them down on each table. It was the high school students acting as servers, and you could tell that they took the job very seriously. Next, they came around with caribou soup, and there were special treats just for the elders and the new teachers to try. There was muktuk, which is a whale blubber cut into little rectangular cubes and to eat raw, and there were pies made from blueberries the women had gone out and picked in the fall. And just so many people that were there together and happy and celebrating what it meant to be thankful and to be a family. This is an amazing, unique community that you really won't find the likes of in the lower 48. The school is almost brand new. There's curriculum, and the district doesn't just offer, but trains on how to use and supports them throughout the year. And there's an incredible access to technology for all students and staff. In our school alone, every K-5 student has access to iPads and computers in the classroom, as well as full computer lab, and every student in grades 6 through 12 has their own laptop to use. Now, that's not to say that everything is perfect. Alaska as a whole does struggle greatly with certain issues such as suicide prevention, domestic and child abuse, and alcohol abuse. There's also a large concern about what's going to happen if some of the harsher drugs make their way up into the more remote parts of Alaska. Just in the district I work in, we had to come together as a whole and support each other with suicides of adolescents and young adults happening yearly. Life up here can also be dangerous, and you have to be very careful. We had one student who had just graduated high school who actually froze to death the next year in the spring. We have had wildlife such as bears come not just close to the village, but right up into the village. And people have to be very, very careful about where they go, making sure that they travel with guns and other people. I remember my first year here, there was a mom of a student who picked me up from the airport and helped me get into my apartment and four-wheeler. That's what we use up here, ATVs or four-wheelers in the summer and fall, and snow machines in the winter. There are very few cars, and so you find yourself either on a four-wheeler, which we call Hondas, or you find yourself walking. There's no such thing as an Uber when you're in Bush, Alaska. And it doesn't matter if your ATV is a Honda or a Yamaha or a Toyota. Up here, they're all called Hondas. Anyway, so she picks me up and she's bringing me home as I'm holding on for dear life with my duffel bag in one hand and my other hand holding onto the Honda. She looks at me and says, "By the way, be careful. Someone saw some wolves around the village." And it was like just jumping straight back off the deep end into the pool with a new wave of culture shock where I and my little city girl self had to come to terms with. This idea that there were wolves in my village in the wintertime and I'd better be careful when I stepped out of my door. I never did see a wolf in the village, and I'm pretty thankful for that. I did, however, get the opportunity to see a bear about 100 feet from the door of my apartment, ambling along its way to the dump on the edge of town. And that definitely taught me to look both ways when I step out of my apartment. Now, to switch gears a little bit, I'm going to talk about the SL me. I'm a leading edge millennial, a woman in my early 30s. I grew up with video games and computers. Mario Brothers, the original Duck Hunt when I was a very young child, and then I can remember Oregon Trail growing up and all the fun stuff that came along with that. I can remember that the first time I ever used a computer, I was probably in first grade. It was quite a while ago. I also remember how typing class was mandatory in high school when I went to high school, and I remember I didn't really know how to type until that class. In college, I enjoyed making new friends, and I would game and spend our Friday nights up until very early in the morning with friends, dividing ourselves into two teams in the dorms and having a great time playing some of our favorites. With my love of technology, I ended up working for the tech department in the university in 2007. Oh, and in 2007, I was asked by my manager to get to know this program called Second Life. It was going to be our job to help talk people through how to deal with any problems or troubleshooting that might come up because the university was going to use the platform for classes. I remember logging into Cell for the first time and looking around and wondering where were the levels and what was the goal and how did you make it to the end? How did you win the game of Second Life? Clearly, I had no idea what I had stumbled upon. However, I did look around and investigate and just start getting familiar with this virtual platform that the university was going to begin using. While it wasn't an instant draw for me, it slowly opened up doors as I discovered more, and I have been a part of this virtual existence for over a decade at this point. In my time in Second Life, I have explored role-play worlds and the fashion world. I have done blogging and writing for magazines. I have done photography and digital art. I have volunteered my time and taken part in Second Life's Relay for Life, which is a team supporting the American Cancer Foundation. I have even served as a DJ for events and clubs. My mind is one that constantly needs challenges, and I found that here in Second Life, I could always try something new. Someone once said that we are only limited by our imagination, and here in SL, we can explore virtually anything, from art galleries to language immersion, education to exploration, and it is just such an incredible world experience. In 2016, I was offered an opportunity to learn from a designer in SL. I had been her blog blogger manager for a while, and the offer came that she would teach me how to design if I wanted to learn. I sort of thought, okay, well, this could be fun, but I never really looked at doing it seriously. And so the lessons began, and I learned how to texture clothing using full perm mesh kits that are available, which are pre-made templates of mesh that you can purchase, recolor, retexture, and then sell under your own brand. This is where it gets interesting. She was doing really, really well at the time, even just using templates. Her business was making at least 100,000 linden a week. That's about 5,000 US dollars every week. And whether she worked or not, once you put clothes out there, people will continue to buy them even if you stop making clothes for a while. Yes. So she was doing really, really well with this. Now, to become a designer in Second Life, you do not need a degree. You do not need any formal training or experience, really. There are so many resources out there that you can go and research and look at and watch. It is actually possible to go from knowing absolutely nothing to becoming a designer and a content creator in Second Life. And Second Life is not the only virtual platform out there. There are actually quite a few where you can create content and upload it to sell that you have made to others. All right. And let's see if this works. Okay, so these are examples of things that I personally have made, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But just to name a few platforms, there's Second Life, there's IMVU, there's Sansar, High Fidelity, Fortnite, and more. So it's not just something that's Second Life specific. All right. Sorry, and I was just corrected. So 100,000 linden, I'm going to redo the math on this. I could be wrong. Math is not my forte. But let's see here. 100,000. Yep. Okay, so they're right. It's $400 a week. So still $400 a week. So my apologies. $400 a week times 4 is still $1,600 that you're making. So there we go. And that was the minimum she was making. Oftentimes she would make much more than that. But that was making stuff even when, or that was money that she was making even when she wasn't involved with making new things. So my apologies, you're correct. $400 a week. Still impressive. Okay. Going back to this. Okay. According to Second Life, people cashed out around $65 billion in 2018. Now that fact I am aware is correct. And that is an amazing amount of money in a single year from a world that is created by its own users. So we're just talking about money that is taken out of Second Life by people who have earned it and taken it out, whether they're doing real estate or they're doing clothing or apparel or fashion or decor. That's just money that was taken out in one. So this idea started to take hold in my thinking that if I could do all of this with a laptop and a satellite-based internet connection, is this something that others up here could too? As spring led into summer, the opportunity arose for me to branch out and open up my own brands. Playing around with different names and concepts, especially those of an Alaskan background, I ended up with the name Aleutian, which is just a play on words from that of the Aleutian Mountains, islands, and so on. So it had that Alaskan connection. Putting stuff out, doing the same thing that I had learned from this other designer. I used templates and full perm items that I had bought and recolored and retextured. However, that soon led me to wanting to learn more. And eventually, I decided to try and do my own original mesh. Doing original mesh means creating your own mesh item in programs outside of Second Life that you can then upload. In order for me to learn how to create original mesh, especially clothing, I had to begin learning Autodesk's Maya program, Marvelous Designer, Substance Painter, and I've even fiddled around with ZBrush. I will say that starting up my own brand and paying for the subscriptions and everything I was going to need was not a small step to begin with. At that point, I was making $0 on any kind of return from what I was selling. Brand new brand, it's what's going to happen. And suddenly I had to rent to pay for a parcel for my store, and I had fees for different softwares to pay, and I suddenly had a staff to take care of. I very much felt like a new small business owner. And in those first 6 months, I probably invested about $1,000 of my own money. In total, my first 6 months of working as a creator, I pulled in just under $600. So I had spent more than I had earned in that beginning period. And this is, I'm going to talk about it in a second, but this is also where the global perspective sort of starts to come into play. From Alaska, I was working with a staff that consisted of people from Greece, Italy, and France, living there, working there, and communicating with me online through Second Life every day. We would have so many conversations about the world and how we see things from different cultures and different perspectives, and we work so well together, even with different time zones. Even 2.5 years later, I'm still working with pretty much the same group of people. And I'll be honest, going back to what I was saying earlier, I really still didn't see much of a return even into January 2017. In fact, I sat down and really talked with the people I had hired as part of my staff to discuss the idea of closing Lucia and just saying that it really hadn't worked out. I had given it 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, it wasn't paying out really well, so I was thinking about just closing it and calling it, done. However, in February, so the very next month, it was like someone had turned the light on. The patience had paid off, and Lucia just blossomed into a brand that was starting to get recognition and starting to do really well in sales. I was starting to suddenly see a return on all those investments that I had made. Things continued on the same path, with some months doing much, much better than other months, but overall a slow trend growing of an increased amount of sales. I did make the move from doing both templates and original mesh, just original mesh, which basically means that I was personally creating every single item that was sold in the store. By the end of the year for 2017, I had gone up to pulling in just over $13,000 for the year. Just doing this as a hobby on the weekends and at night for fun. Now, this is before rent is paid and subscriptions are paid and staff is paid and all the rest of that. I'm just giving you some rough figures. But it was at this point where I realized that with just a laptop, a mouse, and an admittedly crappy internet connection, the stream was possible. Because if I could do this for fun on my off time, imagine what someone could do doing this full time. I started to really pay more attention to the idea that if I could do it, I could teach my students how to do it too. Now, even as I was explaining this whole idea to someone, the question came up about ages and Second Life. It sounds great when you're working with college students, but really doesn't sound like something you could do with high school students, right? Actually, Linden Labs has a solution for that. According to their website, teens can access Second Life. Students who are between the ages of 16 and 17 years old can access regions and search results that have a general maturity rating. Students who are between the ages of 13 and 15 years old can access Second Life through an affiliated organization, but will be restricted to the private estate of that organization. Only avatars approved by that organization will be able to enter those estates. They cannot use the Second Life search or purchase items from Marketplace. So that keeps them a little safe from what we all know is out there in Second Life, but it gives a buffer and a protection for students who are a little bit younger. Only avatars approved by that organization. Okay, sorry, I already said that part. So this means that you can actually have students in high school start to learn about content creating and even accessing platforms like SL, like what they might be able to look like and how they could start to dream of how to do this. Now, I'm not saying that we should take all the high school kids and put them on Second Life and let the party begin. Not quite. However, in situations where we can use the virtual platforms for education, I think it's a great idea. Ideas that spring to mind are things like creating a 3D environment of what Jamestown might have looked like in the early colonies, or in taking a sim and dividing it into sections, and then each section is redone to look like a specific climate. There are so many opportunities available for how to use digital platforms as a tool responsibly in those terms. I think allowing high school students to access programs like Second Life is a great idea. And for students who are very interested in game design and in gaming as a possible career path, it's definitely an option that should be talked about and examined. The same students who tell me in middle school that they want to be a gamer when they grow up will usually start talking about how they want to be in game design by the time they get into high school. This opens up the door to help show students how many possibilities are actually out there. Yes, they could go to Los Angeles and go work for the Riot Games, but what if you're a student who has grown up in a remote or rural area and you don't really want to leave your home and family and culture? Meaning the student. What if you love to game and do game design, but you're happy where you are? Oh, it cut off. So I'll just copy and paste this. There we go. So there's the whole thing. In the case of the students that I work with, out here in Alaska, there's a trend that happens when many of them get to the end of their senior year of high school. According to the U.S. Department of Education in 2017, the graduation rate for the state of Alaska was 78.2%. We have the 5th worst graduation rate in the country, and this is without a qualifying high school graduate exit exam. To graduate in Alaska, a student only needs to receive 21 credits. For those who do graduate, not everyone moves on to tertiary education. That's to be expected anywhere. Not everyone is going to go to college. However, out of 21 students in one of the graduating classes, only one of them went on to either vocational training or to college. Now, every graduating class is going not every graduating class is going to be that drastically one-sided, but that is a real statistic and something to really think about. Now ask those same 21 students, how many of them play video games? How many of them would have been interested to delve into learning more about finding out how to get involved in the gaming virtual world career paths? I would hazard a well-educated guess that the statistics would have been quite different. See, the kids, and I'm going to break off for a second here, the kids at my school, the school I work at, the high school kids, the middle school kids, they all know what I do. The teachers all know, actually the whole district knows. They know that there's this crazy teacher who has this little online business, and the kids all think it's amazing. They are, they think it's incredible, and they want to learn how to do it. And I'll talk in a little bit about the two that are starting this venture. But it's really showing how much interest there is when the kids are talking about it and asking questions and really engaged about these platforms and about these possibilities. And man, how cool it must be to take classes or to create and to get money without having to leave. Hello, welcome. For the students who do attend a tertiary education of some form or another, they face a new kind of challenge, pretty much the same one I did when I went to college. While sharing my own journey, I mentioned about those moments where it felt like I was jumping into the deep end and having to figure out how to stay afloat. That is very much how students have told me they feel when they try to go to college in big cities from here. Even though Anchorage and Fairbanks are nowhere near the size of New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago, for someone who has grown up in a village of no more than 500 people, the city becomes an entirely new element where they have to sink or swim. With so many people, so much noise, so much going on all of the time, it can become very overwhelming, and we'll see students who will try for a semester and realize they're not prepared to handle it at all and come home. There was one student who, while she did very well in the village and the educational setting here, when she went to college in Fairbanks, she ended up having a breakdown because of how different and overwhelming everything was for her. Another study was done in 2017 where the University of Alaska in Fairbanks published statistics that showed only 33.5% of students who go and try and get a bachelor's degree actually finished and received their degree within 6 years. Yes, exactly. Given an additional 2 years to get their degree, only 38.2% of the class eventually completed the degree within 8 years. So out of 100 students who start a bachelor's degree, after 8 years, only 38 of them are actually going to find success. In some ways, what we're telling kids who grow up in these high rural, remote environments, in order to pursue opportunities, they need to leave all of those support systems and go somewhere else to find success. I believe, and I have worked very hard over the past 2.5 years to begin building this bridge, that we can open an alternative path for students, especially those who are firstly interested in gaming and game design, secondly, who want to be successful, and thirdly, who don't want to leave their home, family, and culture. By offering opportunities to teach these skills and programs to students in remote and rural areas, we are providing a way for them to begin a possible career that will allow them to literally work from anywhere. Whether they wish to remain in the village and stay here, or they wish to pack up and go explore the globe, these are opportunities that open the entire world to them. And it is not just content creating and 3D modeling. While that is the path that I personally chose, there are actually a wide variety of opportunities available to people who want to freelance and or work with a studio or company, but do so from remote-based sites. Other opportunities include concept artists, 3D modelers, graphic artists, animators, riggers, web developers, social media managers, translators, writers, customer support, and of course, just like YouTube sensations, bloggers and bloggers. And this is just scratching the surface. It's like seeing an iceberg and knowing that there's still 90% of the ice that you haven't even seen yet. When I first started working on Maya and learning on my own, I investigated online institutions that could help me teach me more of the skills I need to succeed in this field. But of course, the caveat was I am also in rural, remote Alaska, and I didn't want to leave to go find these classes. So there were some amazing institutions out there, and I had my heart set on one of them. But can you believe it? In order to attend an online institution, I had to be a resident of California. They would only take people from California to go to their online school. Okay. So I even called and tried to explain to them where I was and what I was doing without success. In order to attend, I had to live in California, yes. So I had actually given up on attending an online institution to learn more about 3D modeling. I was looking around for where I would start my PhD in education, and just for fun, I tried looking around one more time for anything that could help me improve my 3D modeling skills without me having to go to physical classes or live in a certain state. Lo and behold, I found somewhere. CG Spectrum is an online college based in Australia that works with students all over the world to teach them concept art, 3D modeling, and animation. Eureka! I signed up for one of their 3D modeling classes, the introduction one, and got such an amazing education in 6 months I spent in that particular, all without me having to write one essay or do one assignment for a topic that didn't pertain to modeling. It was purely based on what I was interested in, and it helped improve my skills in just so many ways that it would take me another hour to tell you just about that. So, from a remote, highly ruralized environment, I have been able to attend tertiary education, learn and improve my skills for content creating and 3D modeling. I have been able to create items and sell them on virtual platforms, both Second Life and Sansar. I have been able to, in the past 2.5 years, I have made over $40,000 doing this just as a hobby in my spare time. All with a mouse, a laptop, and a crappy connection. And I am not an enigma. According to a survey done by Wagner James Auer from January 24, 2019, with SL merchants, over 1 in 10 make a full-time income of over $50,000 or $50,000, my apologies, dollars a year. 8% of all of SL merchants surveyed made over $100,000 a year. Another 12% make an income between $21,000 and $50,000 a year, which qualifies as a full-time income in some parts of the world. It is completely possible to offer training and teaching to students in high school or tertiary programs, no matter where they are, that will introduce them to the opportunities to explore and kickstart their own journey. Not only is it possible, but students are extremely excited about the opportunity. Video games and computer games and even games on their phones are now an integral part of their lives, and it is more of a concrete, tangible application of skills for them than much of what is taught even in the core subjects. With those I work with, I have 2 students currently on a path towards wanting to take part in game design when they graduate high school, whether that is to go on to college and get a degree or take part in an online program from home, but both of them have begun learning how to do 3D modeling with me. I will repaste this so you can see the whole thing. Whether that is where they see themselves in 10 years or just the beginning, we've gotten them excited about the future, eager about opportunities, and onto a path forward. And that sounds like a great start to me. All right, and I'm done. That's my story and background and everything else.